Welcome back to the Less Podcast. This is Frank Helmstetter thanking you for coming this week to listen to this new and up-and-coming podcast that I have been playing around with. I do apologize for the late release on this issue. However, I was backed up from a weekend in California at a wedding and behind on some schoolwork, things like that nature. So I do apologize that this is a day late and $1 short, but hopefully not, because I have some great things to talk about today. Today I'm going to be discussing plastic pollution, and how we can make efforts to live in a more sustainable world where specifically plastic pollution in our oceans affects our everyday lives, and why we should specifically care about these issues. So I want to thank you for tuning in, and here is the Less Podcast, episode 2. According to biologicaldiversity.org, at the current rate that plastic is entering our oceans, it is expected to outweigh all of the fish in the sea by 2050. Yes, so in pounds of fish, plastic is expected to outweigh fish in the amount of pounds that are in the ocean, which is incredible. And of the ocean that has not been affected by plastic pollution, so no square mile in the ocean does not have any form of plastic pollution in it, which is ridiculous. There's no square mile of pure water left. So what does this mean? Well, plastic affects human health, and that's something that I think we can all get on board with. Not only is it toxic to our ecosystems and the animals that we may care about, but it also affects us. Many of you have probably heard of microplastics in fish, and fish are ingesting these plastics, and they break down into these microplastics, and then when we eat fish or seafood, we in turn eat these plastics, even in these little tiny microscopic forms. See, some of the problem is that we actually don't have a lot of knowledge about what plastic particles themselves do when they interact with tissues and cells in humans. But we do know that the physical effects of particles give insight to the possible risks of exposure to humans. So in other words, we know that the effects of particles in animals and how that affects them could be very similar to how it will affect humans. So regardless, nobody wants to be eating plastic. Let's get real. Nobody wants to do that. I don't like the idea of accidentally eating plastic. It is made of chemicals, and I tend to try to eat a diet that is less chemically engineered, so to speak. So that is that. Nobody wants to be eating plastic, so that's how it kind of affects us as humans. It also will affect us based on the animals that are eating it, and this extinction of certain animals and endangerment because of their environments, specifically in the ocean. As I said, their environments are being essentially stripped from them, from their natural self. It also affects coral reefs. Like I said, there's tons of research on this. It would be of great benefit to you to check out this research for yourself. So we talked about health, right, and how that affects us. And I want to say that it is not just oceans, but land as well. The same things that happen to ocean animals can happen to birds, We see this in birds a lot of microplastics in birds, and we see it in different animals as well. But yes, this affects ecosystems. It throws off the food chain. There are many bad traits about plastic pollution, and that's not something that we want, right? So this podcast is not just to talk about the effects of plastic pollution. I think we know at this point where we've gotten ourselves into, and if you don't know, like I said, go ahead and click out of the podcast and look up for yourself images of the amount of plastic that enters our oceans every second, and it is drastic. There are something crazy like a ton of plastic. It is unbelievable. It is utterly disgusting that we have created a world like this. And frankly, I am kind of tiring myself talking about the actual issue of it. So this is going to be less about the issues of plastics in our world and more about why we need to be caring about this and what we can do to live in a more sustainable world and possibly start to retrace our steps in this horrible process that we've created. So I want to start by saying that recycling is not enough. Now, I know you're thinking, Frank, I have to buy certain things, and I totally get that. I totally understand. It is not possible when companies are wrapping things in plastic and the things that you need to buy are lined in plastic material. It is not possible to avoid these things sometimes, but at the same time, we should be striving very hard. We should be striving with every individual item to try and avoid using plastic. For example, I bought a jar of peanut butter last night, and rather than grab a jar of my convenience that was plastic, I grabbed a glass jar. Now, this is one piece of trash that will not end up being plastic pollution in our oceans, and that's the way I like to think about it. I want to talk about an article from the New York Times, and it is from 2018, I believe. Yeah, May 29th, 2018. It discusses the issue of acceptance of our foreign garbage in China. So basically, when we recycle, a lot of companies and cities will send recycling to China for processing. But, and I'm going to quote here, but as part of a broad anti-pollution campaign, China announced last summer that it no longer wanted to import foreign garbage. Since January 1st, it has banned imports of various types of plastic and paper and has tightened standards for materials that it does not accept, end quote. So this article is great. I would recommend reading it. It is titled, "Your Recycling Gets Recycled, Right? Maybe or Maybe Not." And that's through the New York Times. Great article, great read. It is written by Livia Albeck-Ripka. And it's a great read, so I would recommend it. But basically the gist of this is that China has tightened their regulations on what they will accept. So as you dig farther into the article, you will see that China is tightening its regulations, and certain plastic products that have any trace or contamination of food still left on it and things like that will immediately head to the landfill. So the point of this is that our recycling may not even be making it to be recycled. Now, I don't want this to be a discouragement for you not to recycle, because it's still important to recycle. However, if you obviously know that something is contaminated and that it realistically will not be accepted, you could actually be helping the environment by throwing it away. And here's why. When you throw something with food on it into recycling and it runs the risk of being contaminated, the entire batch around it of recycling, China will say, no, this whole batch is contaminated. We're not going to accept this. It won't recycle. It won't break down properly. So you actually throwing it away intentionally, knowing that it will not get recycled, could actually benefit the environment in the long run. But my point is that recycling is not enough. In today's world, we have tighter regulations, as I spoke about, and also the reality that some will just out of sheer chance will not make it to be recycled. So I don't want this to be discouraging or for me to say that you shouldn't be recycling. It just should be second to reducing and reusing. Our challenge should be for a sustainable world, not one in which we use single-use plastics only to have them recycled. Of course, the question arises in this topic, can I really make a difference? Can me in America, which is actually not known for its plastic pollution in our oceans, actually, according to a study, 90% of ocean plastic pollution comes from 8 rivers, and I think about 5 of them are in Asia. So a lot of these Asian countries that are taking our recycling are the ones that are allowing it to end up in our oceans. However, we still can make a change in America, even though it may not seem like we're really contributing to this. And the question is, can we really make a difference? Well, I just want to encourage everyone out there that exponential growth starts with us. It starts from a source, and we as humanity must demand alternative means by which to obtain and buy our goods. Plastic is not working. So what I mean by this, and this is something I jotted down in my notes if it sounds red, what I mean by this is that I think that the thought that we can't make a difference is the first step to failure. And what I mean by this is that we need to start somewhere. It needs to start with one person. And as people like me share these ideas, then more people can share ideas, and there's exponential growth. And then eventually proposals can be held to ban certain things and to make things and advocate for change and see this change come through, even if it is in a small setting, because it starts with one person, it starts with one community, it starts with one city, it starts with one state, one country, and then eventually one world. So we need to keep fighting for this. We need to keep fighting for change. We need to basically demand that our city and our organizations that we're a part of will stop using plastic and find alternative ways to can their goods, to make their products. Because if we don't stop using plastic, if we don't stop producing it at the rate that we are producing it at, and finding an excuse in that it is cheaper to make, we are going to experience mass extinction, starvation, and it also will affect our climate as it already has. And so I want to challenge all of the listeners out there to cut down on plastic use, even if it is a little bit, even if you're not perfect all the time. I have used plastic in the past week. It is nearly impossible to not use it because it is so used by what you buy, and the companies use it in their everyday products. So it is very hard to cut down as an individual consumer. But I want to challenge you to cut down plastic use. Here are a few ways. You can use reusable mugs or no lid. I found myself using reusable mugs, and it's great, but sometimes I forget it. And what I end up doing is I go to Starbucks or wherever I'm going to get coffee on campus or off campus, and I will say, yeah, can you make me whatever, but can you make it without a lid, or can you not put a lid on it? And sometimes people give me weird looks, but honestly, I don't really care. I figure that I would rather face a little bit of, that's weird, than contribute to this already ever-growing problem. And another one that I didn't really think about is using bar soap instead of body wash. If you think about using body wash bottles and things like that, it's hard to avoid it in shampoo. I'm still working on a way to cut down on shampoo plastic in my life, but I have continually made efforts to switch over to bar soap because they usually come in paper boxes and rather than plastic wrapping or plastic containers. Buy in bulk to control what you need and to cut down on plastic containers as much as possible. So buying in bulk is not buying mass amounts of things. It's not Costco shopping. Buying in bulk in this context is going to a place that will allow you to bring your own containers and buying things by weight. So places that offer those things, buying things like nuts, and just the amount that you need, put it in a mason jar or some reusable container, and that will cut down on plastic as well. And then I want to leave with a final thought, and here it is. It's reduce, reuse, and recycle in that order. And what I mean is we should be reducing what we use first. And if that doesn't work, then we reuse. So we can reuse cans that we've used before. And then it's recycle. If you have no choice and you have no way to reduce or reuse, then you recycle it. So I just wanted to share this with you guys and a little bit about why I care about plastics and why they need to be limited, and eventually a perfect world would be one where we avoid plastics, because we did it before and I believe that we can do it again. Plastics are fairly new, yet they have dominated our oceans and polluted our world past the point of sheer coincidence. It is horrible to look at images of plastic pollution and animals that are dying and things like that. And so in order to live in a more sustainable world, we must find a way around this. We must. And I want to challenge you, even though you feel like just one person, to cut down on your plastic use. One day, we could live in a world with clearer oceans and a healthier environment. Thank you. And I will see you guys next week, Monday at noon.